So here we go. We are into season 3 of the podcast, and I am thrilled to introduce to you all Diamond Drip of Diamond Drip Consulting. Diamond and I met through the online space, and I believe we were meant to connect. She brings a beautiful perspective, informed by human design and her own story, to living life that is authentic and doing what you were meant to do in this lifetime. Diamond is a best-selling, award-winning author, coach, and speaker who's all about helping women ditch self-doubt and embrace their true selves. Already sounds pretty aligned to the mission here at She's Wild and Freed. With a background in visual communications and brand strategy, Diamond discovered the game-changing world of human design and gene keys. Now, she is passionate about showing others how to trust their gut and tap into their full potential. Diamond's own journey from stressed out entrepreneur to confident leader has even been featured on KQED Radio in New York, Medium, and has been a guest on several podcasts. Her favorite saying, "The limit doesn't exist, but fear and self-doubt will make you think it does." All right, I have one trigger warning because when we began this conversation, Diamond talked about her childhood, and she talks about child abuse, neglect, and even suicidal thoughts. So if you want to skip that part, you will not miss any of the good, juicy details in this episode. Just fast forward past 8 minutes and 45 seconds. I hope this conversation is interesting and beneficial to you in your journey. And without further ado, let's dive into the episode with Diamond Drip. Hey y'all, my name's Jen. I'm a health and life coach on a mission to empower women, and this season I call the messy middle. We believe it's never too late to dream your wildest dreams and to build lives freed from the shoulds and have-tos. Here, we talk to ourselves like we do our girlfriends and our sisters and daughters. I will share stories and resources with lots of encouragement and a little bit of tough love to drive you toward action. In this podcast, we talk about everything: career, relationships, motherhood, and health. So grab your sneakers and let's go, because she's wild and freed. Welcome, Diamond, to She's Wild and Freed podcast. I'm so happy to have you here.
It is such an honor to be here with you and our listeners today. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I want to start off by you just telling us more about you. You can go all the way back to childhood and tell us your journey, or wherever you want to start, just to tell us how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, you know what's interesting? I think I will take you up on some of my childhood there, because I do think that it's relevant, especially as it comes to the work that I came here to do in this lifetime. So growing up, I had an undiagnosed borderline personality mom with narcissistic tendencies. And so how that showed up in my life was basically taking everything on as if it were my fault when things went wrong, even when sometimes mom was just kind of living in her shadows and just not wanting to take personal responsibility. And throughout our relationship, we had lots of ups and downs, to include when I was removed from her care due to child abuse and neglect when I was 15. And when I was 14, this was kind of like the pinnacle, the culmination, I guess, if you will, of like, I just can't take it anywhere. So take it anymore. And so when I was 14, I was hospitalized a lot, and that's what landed me with the diagnosis of bipolar 2 disorder. Because at the time, I didn't really know a way to escape the, for lack of better phrasing in this moment, the hell that I was going through with my mom. I didn't know how to escape that. So I thought, especially as a minor, where your parents have all the control in the world.
Yes.
I thought that the way to get out was to not be here anymore, to not be on this planet anymore, or to self-harm as a way to distract myself from the life that I was living in. And fun fact, when you do that as a teen, gets you placed in the hospital, especially like when you start running away and things like that. And so when I was removed from her care when I was 15, about a year later and several hospitalizations later, it kind of pushed me into this adulthood, as it were. Like, I was still a child of the system. I still had ties to some of my family, namely my aunt on my mom's side. Later, when I was in the system, they found my dad and this whole other branch of family that I didn't know I had. I went from being an only child to a middle child of 5.
Wow.
Right? I always leave a pause for people to just take in what I said. Only child, middle child of 5. Like,
gosh, that is, I mean, all of this is a lot, but that is a lot. Oh my goodness.
So I say that to say, I tried a lot of external things to kind of make stuff make sense, because life wasn't making sense. I was like, this can't be all there is. Like, if it is, then I'm checking out. Like, I can't do this anymore. And so because I didn't really have that person, right? Our parents are supposed to help shape and mold and grow us. I didn't meet my dad until I was 15, almost 16. And my mom pretty much, like, the whole time you're in the system, the goal is reunification. And she made it very clear that she wanted no parts of that. So for a good portion of time, I was kind of just like on my own. Luckily, my aunt, stepped in. But fast forward a little bit through end of high school, I went into the Air Force because I didn't know much about life from aside from what I had experienced. But the one thing that they always said was, you need to get good grades so you can get into a good school, so you can get a good job, and then you'll meet your spouse, you'll have the baby, get the house, all the things, etc. Yes. And then white picket fence, retired, happy ever, like the whole thing. So I was like, yes. Well, Air Force seems like a way for me to go to a good school part while also making income to live life. And my depression really kicked in when I was in the Air Force. So much so that I was early separated because, there were times where outside of, what I was going through, like, I thought that I was over kind of like these suicidal ideations and thoughts like that because I was removed from the situation. But I didn't realize that the problem was even deeper than that by that point. Because at that point, I was like kind of capping my own potential. I was like, well, I can't do the thing that I want to do without a good job, a good degree, etc. So like, let me go this path. And that was like a whole gamut of things that sent me into depression. And when I got out, I really I was trying to figure out, like, what do I do now? Like, that was supposed to be the way. Yeah. And none of the ways that they say, it's not going the way that they're saying it's supposed to go. Right. They, right.
Oh boy.
And I remember I was going through another depressive phase when I was out of the Air Force, and I was watching a lot of movies, and one of them inspired me to kind of like, okay, well, I don't know what the plan is, but I know that I need money to live it. And so I need a job, and I can't just sit at home watching movies all day. So one of the movies I watched inspired me to apply to a gym position.
Okay.
Because I was like, I'll wear sweatpants. I'll tell some people they're doing fine, even if they're not. Like, it'll be great. It's fine. And so while I was there, one of my innate gifts, which I'm sure we'll get to later, but one of my innate gifts is like this gate of ambition. And so when I got there, I saw that there was room to like move up to get different positions. So I worked my way up all the way until I was general manager. And I was like, oh, this is great, right? Like, I'm doing the thing. By that point that I was general manager, I was in school pursuing my degree. I was like, I finally know what I want to do, enough to pay a school money to teach me how to do it.
Yes.
And then I have this like salary job. And then I also, at this point, I had my daughter, who at that point, I think was like 2 or 3.
Okay.
And then I lost my job because the company lost its lease. And I was like, okay, so again,
what are you supposed to do? You keep checking the boxes and oh no.
Just keeps getting snatched from underneath me. So that was when I made the pivot into entrepreneurship, because I was like, you know what? F it, because I'm trying all these ways that are proven and tried and true that they say work, and they're not working. So I don't know what paving my own path looks like, but doggone it, I'm gonna try. And that was
that's great.
Yeah.
Okay, 4 years ago. It's definitely an inspiration to hear, though. You got knocked down quite a bit, especially as a child, and then to then still continue to try and press forward and then get to where you are today. So now you own Diamond Drip Consulting. Tell us just a little bit about your business and what you do.
I love your nails, by the way, for our listeners. She's got these like colorful Halloween nails. Love it.
Thank you.
So what I do at Diamond Drip Consulting is I coach women who are like Gen X, millennials. And what we do is we work on transforming the stories that they have been told to tell themselves. Like, they, in essence, have learned limitations about what types of things they can do in this lifetime, who they can be in this lifetime, who they're expected to be, thanks cultural expectations and norms and et cetera. And so what we do when we work together is we unearth who they are authentically based on their unique soul blueprint. And we use that to help them take back sovereignty in their life around decisions that lead them to satisfaction and joy versus meeting a lot of resistance, trying to make the proven things work for them. So that's in essence what I do with clients. And then once we know who they are, we bring that into their business. We help them show up fully as them so that they can magnetize the people that they're here to help.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. Okay, so you talked about a blueprint. So tell us about that. So, well, let me back up. So Diamond and I met earlier this year, and she did a 30-minute read on my human design chart, and it was very much what I'd heard in some other podcasts or when I've read is like when someone tells you these things from your chart, you're like, my mouth dropped. I was like, what? How is this even happening that you know me, but you don't know me? And so yes, tell us a little bit more about human design, because I was talking to a few folks that I was going to have you on the podcast, and I started trying to explain it, and it's hard to explain. So definitely give us, that very baseline understanding, and maybe we'll go a little deeper too with a few aspects. But yeah, tell us about human design.
Yeah, I got you. So baseline human design, it gives you insight into the way your energy flows. I like to call it pretty much a user's manual for this body in this incarnation. So at our time of birth and about 88 days prior to our time of birth, our soul actually chose the gifts that it was going to need to help us fulfill our purpose here in this lifetime. And so human design gives you insight into this map of how your energy flows. It tells you what your gifts are. It tells you how your energy shows up in the world and how that has an effect on other people. I recently learned, since we last talked, like a month ago, that it also tells you who your people are, like who you're meant to serve in this lifetime. And based on the openness that you have in your chart, the solutions that you're meant to nourish those people with. So it gave like a whole nother layer to this, like, you know, business aspect, because I was using it a lot to help people get like purpose clarity and get in touch with themselves. And now I'm like, no, like you can niche down with it. You can like it.
That is so cool. Well, oh my gosh, I love that too, because it's not like you're sitting there being stuck and saying, okay, this is it. This is how I know it. You're ever evolving and learning. So that's super cool. Yeah. Wow. I can see how helpful it would be for folks who are in business, like you said, niching down or understanding what they were brought here to do, which you mentioned that right at the beginning. So, you know, maybe tell us a little more about that, our soul chooses. Well, you explain it again. So our soul comes into our body at a certain point, and then it's our purpose. So,
yeah. So there are a number of different sciences that go into human design. But when you look at the body graph chart, it's kind of like a hodgepodge map of all of them in one, which is why it's called the science of differentiation. Because where a lot of people might know like one or more of the sciences, but they don't know how they all work together. For example, astrology, astronomy is one of the sciences that goes into it. And most people at a certain point in life, right? Of course, I've learned about this other thing called spiral dynamics, which looks at the different levels of human consciousness and how we evolve to these like upper tiers, which is a whole different story. But most people who have come across horoscopes in some way and they've either tried it, they have some sort of experience with it. And the thing I love about horoscopes is that it does help give you kind of a flavor for how a person's energy shows up. You know, Cancers are this way, where blah, 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 you know, whatever they say about the different signs. But whereas some of the things based on your zodiac sign, they might not fit. So like, you know, for some people, it's like, that's a Cancer thing. Okay. Yeah. But then there are some things where it's like, I don't really know. Human design cuts through all of that, because it's the science of how we are different. Because of these other sciences and these other elements that go into it, there has not been, especially not in my experience, a chart that looks exactly like someone else's chart. The numbers are different. The definition is different. Like there's always something, which is why it's so exciting for me, because every person is like this new puzzle that I get to dive into and help them understand like what's going on here. How does this all work together? But so there are two, when you look at your body graph chart, there are two like columns on either side, and they have a bunch of numbers. They correlate to a bunch of different planets, and it's a lot of things that go into it. I'm not going to go dive deep because baseline. Keep it here. And so one of the gifts that really shows up is, for me, it's the conscious sun. So it's the gate of beginnings. And so it helps tie into what I'm doing in this like incarnation, because like I said, every person is different. So every time I dive into someone's chart, like that's fulfilling me on like this deeper level of like, this is a new beginning of helping someone understand who they are. But it's also the way my energy shows up outwardly in the world of like, okay, this is how you live life as your true self and not who you were told to be. So like there are different gifts and they can come up in different ways. But it's so exciting because like once you understand it and once you know, it's like, this is how I show up. And you start to question yourself less. You start to doubt yourself less because like you said, like even if when we met to do the mini reading, you wanted to be like, human design is a bunch of baloney. I don't subscribe. You're like, how do you know who I am without knowing me?
Yes, it is. And you're right. I mean, you're talking a little bit about the body graph, and certainly our listeners can dive into this deeper if they want. But it is kind of confusing. Well, not kind of. It's very confusing. There's a lot of numbers. Like you said, there's the 2 columns on the side. But you just mentioned something that I want to learn a little bit more is that conscious sun. So just tell us what that is in the chart and what it's telling us. So I know you started to, but tell us a little more.
Yeah, so your conscious sun in your chart, it also corresponds to your brand sphere in Gene Keys, which is another tool that I use.
Yes.
And so this is all about what your soul came here to do in this lifetime. Like I have personally been seeing the scenario where what you're here to do, because there's 4 pieces. So you have your conscious sun and earth, and then your unconscious sun and earth, which in Gene Keys, what you're here to do and what you're here to learn, and then what keeps you healthy and what deeply fulfills you, what your purpose is. And a lot of times our conscious sun, what we're here to do, will actually tie into our purpose because we're doing it. That's how we're contributing to the world. And that reflects in our purpose.
And that's what you get when you run the chart and you look at your human design, you get those 4 elements.
Yeah, so you'll get the numbers. And then of course, like I always say, human design is one of those things, like you can go to, like I discovered human design via a rabbit hole trying to understand my own chart. And so when you pull your chart, there, is that in the cheat? Because when someone pulls their chart, I send them a cheat sheet to kind of help them decode some of the things, but I don't think the dates are in there. So if they wanted to know what their most important gift was, they would just look at their top right number on the dark side, and they would just do a simple Google search for like gate, etc. But one of the things that I really like to stress upon people, especially if they don't have a 1 line in their profile, in their archetype, in their energy of how they show up, you can absolutely put all of the pieces together by Googling and everything, but it can be so helpful to have someone there who has done that, and they're able to ask you reflection questions to help you really process the energy and how it's showing up in your life.
Yeah, for sure. And I agree with you. I think, I mean, you can Google anything and you can go down a rabbit hole and get a lot of information, but it's more so of like, well, what do you do with all of that information, And I mean, now we can even ask ChatGPT and they'll tell us, but I think to your point, having a guide or having someone who can decode or dig a little deeper with you is definitely helpful. If someone is wanting more or when they're ready.
Yeah.
I am quickly interrupting today's episode to invite you, when you're ready, to schedule a discovery call with me. So if you're curious about working with me as your coach, or just curious as to what health and life coaching really entails, schedule a call with me. The link is down in the show notes. It's a Calendly link, and it'll take you to when I have availability to schedule an appointment. Even if you are not ready or just a little curious about what it's like to work with me, I promise you that this conversation is really impactful, and we have a lot of fun in the hour we schedule together. This is complimentary, so it doesn't cost you anything except for an hour of your time, and it's there for you when you're ready. So come on, schedule that appointment with me. I would love to talk with you and explore what you want and how to get you there. All right, back to the episode. Well, I do want to ask you about It is the types. So are there four?
Yes.
Are there four types, or how many types are there? And just tell us about those.
So basically, there are four types. However, depending on who you ask, they'll say that there are five because one is a hybrid. So you have your manifestors, you have your generators, and then you have your manifesting generators. And then you have your projectors and your reflectors. So depending on who you ask, it's five, but it's basically four.
Got it. Okay. And, for our listeners, and I'm not sure how many of you have heard about this before, but I was a little bit familiar and heard about these manifesting generators and reflectors. And I'm like, what is this? So that's one of the things that you get when you do get your chart, and you'll get some details about what that means.
Yes.
Now, how does that relate to, you mentioned in the beginning, you have a gate of ambition. So tell us how that relates to what we've been talking about.
Ooh, I love this question right now. So
good.
So I am a generator in human design. Every single energy type has a specific strategy of how the universe brings it opportunities, brings it people, brings it ideas, inspiration, etc., for us to then check in with ourselves and see whether that is aligned for us or not. So it's kind of like this inner compass that we have. And so as a generator, my strategy is to respond. And so what that means is the universe will bring me ideas, people, it'll put things in my path for me to check in with my sacral first, because I have emotional authority, but it starts in the sacral, which is, that internal, nonverbal, guttural, yes or no.
I was about to ask, is that kind of like that gut feeling or intuition, that sort of thing? Or what? Okay.
So something will come across my path and I'll be like, ooh, yeah, I want to do that. Yes, absolutely. Or something will come across and I'll be like, that really does not light me up. I don't want to do that at all, actually. I have no inkling for that. And so it's this yes or no. And so for sacral generators, it kind of stops there. It's like, is it a yes or is it a no? If it's not a hell yes, then it's probably a heck no.
Yeah.
When you have emotional authority, it's the same, except you have to wait. So the motto for people who have emotional authority is there's no truth in the now. So at a minimum, we should sleep on things to make sure that we're not deciding from one extreme or the other. We're not deciding from being in this heightened, yes, everything phase, or being in kind of a lower part of the wave where it's like, everything sucks. I don't, kind of riding out the wave and making sure that you're deciding from an emotionally neutral place. So that's just, little difference there. So generators, we respond.
Okay.
And when you talk about this gate of ambition, which is in my conscious earth.
You talked about conscious sun, conscious earth. Okay.
So the gate of ambition, you would use your energy. So how this played out for me, I was in a very low phase. I was watching a bunch of movies. And then I watched one movie where pretty much the guy was complaining about how much it sucked working at a gym because he wanted to do other things with his life. Okay. But in him complaining, I was like, that actually doesn't sound so bad. I think I would actually like to do those things and receive a paycheck. So I think I'm going to apply to work at a gym. And so the universe, right, I normally probably wouldn't have picked that movie, but I did for whatever reason that day. I watched it, something ignited in me. And then when I got the position, when I got into the role and I'd been there for some time and started to see the, gyms they have a high turnover rate for good reason, honestly. It's very sales heavy and you don't really like the sales piece. But but when I was there, I was able to see this, observe this, and I responded and something ignited in me that ambition of I can move up here. And so, whereas before in the thick of my depression, just watching movies all day, I didn't have a desire to do anything. I was like, I'll just do this all day. It's fine. It's not fine. Society says it's not fine, but for me right now, it's fine.
Yes. Yeah.
And then to get there and to like have something like, ooh, you could do that. Or you could do this. Oh, there's an operations role for this where you don't have to do as many sales. And so that was kind of how that played out for me. It was like, ooh, I think I'd like to do that. He's complaining a lot, but I think I'd like to do that. And then getting there and just kind of observing, waiting out the emotional wave of like, no, I think I would actually like to move up here. I think that I could, you know, make an impact or whatever I was thinking at the time. Is probably,
yeah, of course. Well, and I think this is so cool for our listeners, just if you're hearing some of this, is that she already recognized her gifts before she recognized her gifts. And I think a lot of us can relate to that, where we know we're naturally good at something or something does light us up, but really decoding that, I don't know if that's the right wording, but decoding that and understanding is something you could certainly do with human design. And there's a lot of tools out there. You know, we're talking about human design today, but I think that's really cool. You know, that really resonates with me, what you just said. The other thing earlier, which I think is so interesting, just like you said, how the universe works. I released a podcast today, an episode today about hiding in plain sight. And it's where we were taught at some point, or we observed at some point that, you know, we as women specifically, because that's mostly this audience, need to be a certain way and whatever it is, you know, and I talked about, you know, in some arenas, I needed to be quiet and small, and others I needed to kind of puff up and be tough. And it was just where I somewhere decided or was told that's how I needed to be. And then, you know, I was hiding my true self. So I think using a tool like this, working with someone can be so helpful. Again, 30 minutes I had with Diamond, and I was like, wait, what? But let me ask you about that. So, and we touched on this a little bit when we did my chart, but I'm a manifester. And you were like, oh, that's rare. And I was like, ooh. And I just, if you'll talk a little bit more about that and what that means.
Yes. So manifestors, for our audience, for our listeners, generators make up like 70% of the population. So in essence, Gen is rare because manifestors make up 9%. And so when you are a manifester, the traditional language puts it this way. So you have this kind of closed off and kind of almost repelling aura when people kind of come in contact with you. And that is why your strategy is to inform, because it helps lessen that resistance that you'll meet along the way. You have this energy, and the way that manifestors operate in the world, these are our ideas people. These are our catalysts. These are people who can have a thought, an idea, an inspiration, and they can just leap right into action. And so the strategy of informing is helpful, because when they're about to embark on a new project or a new task, and let's say, for example, you're going to need some time to like really, you know, cross all the T's, dot all the I's, and your family's like, yo, what are you doing? And then you have to like stop and like explain to them what you're doing and why it's important and all of the things.
Yeah.
It knocks you off of your path almost. Like you're in action, you're in flow, you're like, I'm doing the things, I'm making it happen. But because you didn't inform anyone who would be affected by your decision, you now are like having to stop and explain, which there's not always a guarantee that you're going to be able to get back in flow, which then makes you angry, which is the not self thing of like, I just
yes,
I want to burn it to the ground, put it all.
Oh my gosh. It's so funny too, because when you first told me that about the anger or the not self, you know, like that's another thing I touched on today in the episode was, and of course we're going to release this later, but I created the idea or the persona of like, no, I shouldn't be negative, anger, sad. Those emotions are bad. Whereas I've started to get in touch with my anger a little bit more, which has been really an interesting and honestly very freeing, very nice to like get angry about something. And that's okay. 'Cause it's all the emotions. We should feel them all at some point. So yeah, that's really interesting. Well, thank you. Thanks for talking a little bit about my chart as well, or my type.
Yeah.
Well, one thing that I would love for you to share with our audience or our listeners is, what if they're interested, if they're like, this is piquing my interest, what they're talking about, it's confusing, but also things are resonating with me. What could they do as a next step?
Absolutely. The next step that I always recommend is to pull your chart. Like okay. It really starts there, and you don't need it's not like a disc or like a Myers-Briggs where you gotta answer a whole bunch of questions. Like legitimately, it's actually the first thing that's on my website. You go, you enter your time of birth, your place of birth, and your date of birth, and you hit submit. And then right there in front of you, you have this chart that Jen has very much already alluded to. It's a lot to take in. But on my website, if you scroll down, it actually gives you some blurbs about what these things mean and how it's showing up for you. And one of the things that I love about technology is that there's a free ebook that they can download that gives them tips on how they can start sleeping better based on their energy type, how they can start managing overwhelm and pressure, and how their immune system was designed. But there's also an option for them to buy a report and actually dive deeper into some of the nuances that are showing up. And people are actually doing it. I love technology because it doesn't require me at all. The report is instantaneous. So that would be the first step, is just to pull your chart, and whatever it says is your strategy and authority. Start noticing how you naturally will that body. Because a lot of us, we make a lot of our decisions with our mind, and the mind is latent with conditioning, from our family, from our friends, from society, all the things. And so when you pull your chart, if people are interested in taking that next step, notice what it says is your strategy and your authority, and start experimenting with what it's like to feel into decisions versus making them from logic and reasoning we're all taught to.
Ooh, I love that. I think slowing down, and that's certainly something I talk about too, is just noticing, just pause, notice, how you're making that decision. So I think I love that. So we'll definitely share your website in the show notes, if they were interested in pulling that. And like she said, it's very simple. And it's based on your date of birth, place of birth, and what was the third one?
Oh,
time of birth.
Time of birth is the most important one.
Okay, so I got mine off my birth certificate. I do have it, but that's, I guess, the best place. So if you don't know, of course, you could ask your mom or somebody, but
or reach out, because sometimes apparently they didn't consistently start putting birth times on certificates until the 80s or something like that. So I do have a tool that I recommend to people when they can't find it and they're like, but I want this information. How do I?
Okay.
Yeah. I did have a question, because we are talking about emotions and slowing down. And you notice that, there's been a lot of conditioning for us to suppress our anger. Anger is not good. It's blah, 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 blah. Yeah. But I'm starting to do more workshops where I talk about very basic things. And so one of the things that I say when it comes to the signature versus the not self is that when you're experiencing your not self, to use that as a signpost to get back into alignment. So I understand that you're taking in, right? You're I'm angry. It's okay to feel angry. I gotta let this energy flow through me. Stress cycle the loop needs to close. But if memory serves, you did have some openness in your chart. Do you ever once you've processed the energy, go And if not, this is a tip for people.
Okay.
Do you ever go to like the voices of the not self from some of the centers that we talked about and see if you're trying to answer one of those questions? And that might be why it's making you angry. Like, am I trying to prove something? Am I holding on to something that's, not good for me? Am I like, sometimes those questions can be a signal of like, oh, that's why I'm angry, because I'm listening to wherever that story came from.
Yes. Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, this happened last night. I got pretty upset with my 12-year-old son. And, he even was like, this is kind of extreme. Like, what's going on? And yes, I was very upset and I was trying to make my point, but I did reflect on it. And I was like, well, why am I so angry at literally like it was because he didn't do his dishes? It's like, those are the things that moms can certainly relate to. It's like, you left the flipping dishes again, but it was a couple of things like that where I just kind of got a little elevated, very elevated. So yeah, I did. I certainly pause, reflect. Sometimes I journal. That is what I did at another time. I just journaled through the whole thing, just writing it all out. So it's really helpful to do that for sure.
I agree.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for that question. Well, yeah, I mean, you just talked about it too. There's some openness, there's closed areas. There's just a lot of great information that can, again, help you true back to who you are, who you're meant to be, who you were born to be, the soul that came into your body. I love that. And getting back to her and then finding ways, if there's some things that maybe aren't in flow, as you just mentioned, that, it's our energy. And I firmly believe in that too. We're all energy, and knowing how to use, which you said, the opened or closed areas and where you make decisions from, that's all really, really helpful. So very cool.
It's been
stuff.
A game changer.
Yeah. Yeah, that's amazing. So, well, a couple other things. So I've seen you everywhere, it feels like. You just released a book. Is that right? Tell us about your book.
Yes. So the name of the book is Destiny Expose, The Leading Ladies, and it's an anthology. So there are 15 of us, and we have all redefined success on our own terms. And we were challenged with picking a story that we had not told. And for context, many of us are speakers. We are authors, and we are people who are out there telling our story. So to be challenged with tell a story you haven't told before, it was like, well, I don't know, because I told them all. I don't know.
Yeah.
So my chapter is called Learning to Lead from Within. And I go really deep into the pivot that I made in my business, where I went from a product-based business to a service-based business and all of the stuff that came with it, because I then became the product, which brought up a whole bunch of feelings of unworthiness and self-doubt and imposter syndrome. Can I really do this? Do I really have the skill? All of the things. And then as a result of, trying all these proven strategies that didn't work and made me feel even more like I was the problem, I decided to get a life coach. And so for an hour a week for 6 months, we talked about the things that were coming up, the old stories that I was telling myself that were keeping me stuck in these patterns. And the chapter really dives deep into that time, because it was a story I hadn't told. And it was one of the things that helped even open me up to these tools that I use now in my personal life and in my business with clients.
That's beautiful. I love that idea. Just being challenged to tell us something you haven't already told us, Oh my gosh, that's beautiful. Okay, so can that be bought anywhere books are sold? Is it everywhere, or where can it be found?
Yeah, so the ebook is on Barnes and Noble, but if people want to get an autographed copy, that is on my website, diamonddripconsulting.com. And for anyone who does do that, please, I beg of you, pull your human design chart, because one of the things that I love is when someone buys a book, I'll send them an email and I'm like, what's your biggest goal right now? And one of the things that I love doing is I like to look at their chart and see, you know, what their conscious sun is, see what their, you know, what their type is. And when I personalize the copy, I'll actually tie in how their design will help them achieve their biggest goal. So,
oh, that's so cool.
You do decide to get the book.
So cool.
Pull your chart, please.
Yes. Oh my gosh. So cool. Well, before we finish up here, is there anything that you wish I had asked about or anything you wanted to talk about we didn't touch on today?
The one thing that I want to make known that we didn't touch on today is I am doing everything I can to make this information more accessible. So that is, you know, having more collaborations, being on more podcasts to just kind of open people's eyes up. But if you really do want to learn more, I'm getting in the process. I currently have the next 3 planned out, but I'm getting in the process of hosting online workshops at least once a month where you can actually get some hands-on kind of, oh, this is how this shows up for me, how this can help my life. Because a lot of people, even the people who do readings, they're like, whoa, that was a lot of information about me. What do I do now?
Yes.
And I'm like, no, okay, so let's baby step it into this is what you do now.
I love it. Yeah, for sure. And I'm sure you can go back and look at things and like, oh yeah, I do that with. So I talked with you before, like I am really interested in astrology. I don't know a whole lot, but I know enough. And I go back and look at my chart all the time and reread things to understand. So yeah, there's tons you can continue to just be more aware. Like you said, notice things. You know, we're all still learning and evolving as humans. So just having some tools in our tool belt is really helpful.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Okay. Well, my final question for you and for all of you listeners, Diamond is my first guest we've ever had on the podcast. So thank you for opening this up, this portal, you know, thank you. But so I am going to close with the final question I want to start asking all guests. So this one is, what is something you do, which is either daily or weekly, a practice that makes you feel wild or freed?
Wild or freed? I would say, and you know what's crazy about this question is I have this empowering question card deck. And one of the questions it asked me recently was, are you doing more things that keep you alive or that make you feel alive? And this feels very much, I very much wish I actually answered that question when I pulled it, because I would be prepared for this moment. But I had been struggling with it, honestly. I would say it's less wild, more freed.
Okay. Yeah.
And that is taking moments for myself throughout the day. That honestly, because I came from a lifetime where people were telling me what I needed to do. And then I went into this entrepreneurship space where it was like, make your own way. And because I was so, you know, vulnerable and so honestly insecure about like how to do it myself, I would listen to these outside voices, which made me feel overwhelmed. So when I take these moments now to really just like be with myself and take notice of my thoughts, bring my attention to my breath, it's like this moment of clarity and freedom that happens that, you know, it's so hard to describe. It's not wild, but it does make me
No, it is freeing for sure. No, that is why I said wild or free. Because kind of getting into our inner wild as women, it's going to take us a minute sometimes. So. No, yes. I love that. And I love everything you shared today. I appreciate you. You know, I think I think folks will hear your story from childhood to pivoting with your business and what you're doing, and something will resonate with them. And that's what's so important to me here. So thank you. Thank you for being vulnerable, for being open and sharing your gifts. And I hope we do this again. Maybe we'll do part 2 where we do dive a little deeper.
Right? Once they've had time to experiment with their strategy and authority. I love that.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Bye. Thank you so much for spending time with me. I hope you feel free to take action toward building the life of your dreams. If something in this episode resonated with you, I would so appreciate it if you would text it to a girlfriend so she can hear the message as well. Until next time, stay wild.